Hello again, everyone. Continuing Seattle Week, I'm going to look at the Mariners of the MLB today. Playing in the AL West is a tough division. I think most baseball fans out there will agree that the AL East is the toughest division in all of baseball, but the AL West is, I think, arguably the second toughest division. You got the Astros, Angels, as well as the Rangers, all kind of fighting in that division. Outside of Oakland and unfortunately the Mariners, this is a pretty tough division. Oakland is 55-72. Mariners are 58-68 as of last night. But in this division, you're going to have three potential 80-plus winning teams. Houston has reached 70-win plateau, and we're not even into September yet after their win last night. And then Texas is 64-60, and the Angels are 64-61. So definitely going to be a tough race as the season goes up to the end here, with September about to start, between those three teams for the division title in the AL West. Fortunately, the Mariners will not be competing in that race to get that division title this season, and I think there's a lot of reasons behind that. As great as Felix Hernandez has been pitching for this team, he's 14-8 with a 3.74 ERA, and he's a strikeout per inning pitcher. He brings what people expect him to bring. He's the ace of this franchise. Unfortunately, outside of him, pitching staff hasn't really been that strong, and teams who have strong pitching staffs like the Angels and the Astros as well as the Rangers win and find a way to make the playoffs. And unfortunately, the Mariners just don't have that. They got a great solid ace, but teams who are successful have a solid starting four, even starting five. And unfortunately, the Mariners, I think, really only have a solid starting 1 and 2. With the 2 being Taijuan Walker. He's only 23 years old, 9-7 with a 4.73 ERA. He's also a strikeout per inning guy. Be nice if his ERA was down about, down to a 3.73 would even be okay. 9-7 record for him. I think that's a solid 1-2 punch. Walker is still young; he's only 23, but I think that is a solid 1-2 punch here with Seattle. They get another 2 starters, and I think they compete with those other 3 teams for this division. Elias and Mike Montgomery and James Paxton. Iwakuma's been hurt this year as well. None of them have really stepped up and played well. Iwakuma's got a 4.29 ERA in the limited time he's seen. Paxton's got a 3.70 ERA, and the other 3 guys I mentioned all have ERAs over 4. Fernando Rodney, their closer, obviously I don't think he's their closer anymore. He does have 16 saves on the season, but 5.68 ERA, way too high for a closer. Even a 2.68 ERA is a little high for a closer, so that's definitely not something you want to see from your closer. A 5-5 record, so clearly he's blown at least 5 saves, and I think that's why they now have Carson Smith in there, who's also 25 years old. He's got 13 saves, but he also has a 1-5 record, so there's 10 blown saves for you right there. You win those games, and you have a 68-58 record. Well, now you're competing in this division, so you can't expect your closer not to have bad nights every now and again. But even if they, instead of blowing 10 games, they only blew 5 of those games, and they're sitting 63-63, they're at least a little closer now in this division. So those tight games, when you get to the 9th inning and you're only up by a run, you need to have a guy who can finish it. Clearly, neither one of those 2 guys have been able to do that for Seattle this year. So I think their pitching staff is definitely going to be something that they look to improve on in the offseason, finding another 1 or 2 starters, getting a closer who can finish games for them more consistently and make them a little more comfortable going into the 9th inning with a 5-3 lead or a 4-1 lead or something like that, to get a guy who can make sure you win those close games, because that's what's going to be key in this division. Looking at their position players and their batting lineup, there's only 2 everyday players on this entire roster that have batting averages over 275 and 50-plus RBIs, and that's Robinson Cano and Nelson Cruz. And when you only have 2 guys on your entire roster who bat over 275 and have 50-plus RBIs, you're not going to be very successful. As great as your pitching needs to be, if you can't score runs, then it doesn't matter if you have 4 or 5 starters that all have 2.5 ERAs. If you can only go out and score 2-3 runs a night, that puts a lot of pressure on your pitching staff. And you are going to have nights where you're playing against great pitchers, especially in this division. So there are going to be nights where it's going to be tough for you to get 4 or 5 runs. But the nights that you can do that, you need to find a way to do that. And unfortunately, when you don't have high batting averages on your team and you only have 2 guys that have averages over 275, it means guys aren't getting on base. So as much as Nelson Cruz has been having a great year and is going to have a 40-plus homer season, maybe even get to 50, if all of his home runs are just solo shots, well, that's not a big deal. You know, if a bunch of his home runs can be 2-3 run shots, that's what changes momentum. That's what shifts the gameplay and can turn a team who's losing right around. If you're down 4-1 in the sixth, he hits a 3-run shot. Well, now the seventh, eighth, and ninth inning are going to be pretty interesting because now you got a tie game. But if you're down 6-1 and Nelson Cruz comes up and he hits a solo shot, well, now it's 6-2. Not a big difference. So you got to find guys that can get on base. And I think, unfortunately, Cano and Cruz have both been having great years, and unfortunately, you're just in a tough situation. I'll start with their catcher, Mike Zunino. He's only 24 years old, so still a young catcher. He's got 11 homers, 28 RBIs, but a 176 average. Not a great average at all. You know, that's about 80 points lower than an MLB average needs to be for him to be playing in this league. And I think since he is young, and clearly this season is not one where they're going to be making the playoffs, they're going to allow him to grow and get the playing time, and I think that's fine. First baseman Logan Morrison, a 217 average, again, not a great average, but he's got 13 homers, 39 RBIs, and 6 stolen bases. So he does have power to his bat. He does have brings a little bit of speed. You get that average up to 257, 267. I think you got a solid first baseman in Logan Morrison. Looking at second baseman Robinson Cano, fantastic year, 276 average for him. 14 homers, 58 RBIs, as well as a couple stolen bases. He also has 30 doubles. And he's only thrown 6 errors. So if you can't find a way to get runs and score a lot of runs, your defense also can't be giving them up. So you can't have a lot of errors. Cano's only given up 6 errors all season, and if you can find a second baseman who's going to have a season with 10 or less errors, knock on wood, hopefully he has a solid September and doesn't commit too many errors. Great second baseman for this team, and definitely a guy you can build a franchise around. Third baseman Kyle Seager, he's been having a solid year, 257 average, 17 home runs, 48 RBIs, 5 stolen bases. Good player there for sure. Shortstop Brad Miller is only 25 years old. He's got a 249 average with 9 homers, 36 RBIs, as well as 11 stolen bases. So all those position players, when you look at Morrison, Seager, Miller, and Zunino, they all have power to their bats. They all can bring some speed. Outside of Zunino, they all obviously have speed to their games and could have 10-plus stolen base seasons. It's just a matter of getting their batting averages up. Again, Seager's 257, Miller's 249 are okay. But if those 3 guys were all batting 260-plus, I think this would be a very different scenario for this team, and I don't think they'd be 10 games below 500. Finishing off with some other players they have, Chris Taylor is kind of a utility player. He's only 24 years old, but he's only batting 170. With 1 RBI and 3 stolen bases, so we'll see if he can find a way to stay with a major league team if it's the Mariners. And lastly, they have a young guy named Ketel Marte, who's only 21 years old. He's got a 286 average with 4 RBIs and a couple stolen bases, but he's only played in like 12 games, so obviously a 286 average for 12 games. The number's a little inflated there, but definitely a young guy that come September when he can do the call-ups, just playing on a struggling team, he's going to see some action. They're going to be able to see what this guy can bring to the team. Looking at the outfield, Seth Smith, first guy I mentioned, 252 average, 10 homers, 31 RBIs for him. They also got Mark Trumbo, who I think's been a bit of a disappointment. His solid numbers, 17 homers, 47 RBIs. I think you're getting a power bat from Trumbo, a guy who can hit 25 homers. Again, if guys aren't getting on base, he's not going to reach 80-plus RBIs. If he gets to 70, I'll be surprised. But his average is also at 252. Get that up 10, 15 points. Very, very solid player, and I think he's a good addition to this team. I do like Trumbo on this team. They also have Ramon Flores, who's a 23-year-old young player. He's just got a 219 average, but I think somebody that might be on this team going into the future. Austin Jackson is having a solid year for this team with a 259 average, 7 homers, 36 RBIs, and 15 stolen bases. So he might not have the same pop to his bat that he used to, but definitely a good speed guy. Like I said, you got speed in the infield positions there. Austin Jackson's only 28, and he can have a 20-plus stolen base season for this team, no problem. And a 259 average, very respectable. Again, nothing great. You get if that was a 269 average or a 274 average, even better. Last guy I'll mention before I get to the MVP on this team, in my opinion, Nelson Cruz. Franklin Gutierrez. He's only played in 30 games, but in those 30 games, he's got a 299 average with 8 homers and 25 RBIs, so I'm expecting to see him getting a lot more playing time throughout September. Unless they want to take a look at their young guys and see what they bring to the table. He's got solid numbers in the 30 games he's played in. finishing off with Nelson Cruz, having a fantastic year for this team, definite MVP on this team. If he was playing on a team that was contending, I think he'd be getting some MVP votes. Right now in the AL, it's kind of coming down to Donaldson or Mike Trout. Like I said, if Cruz was playing on this team and they were 63 and 63, I think maybe he'd be getting some votes as well. Unfortunately, since he does DH every now and again, I think that can kind of hinder his ability to get some MVP votes, but he is having a very MVP caliber type season. 320 average, 38 home runs, 79 RBIs. He's really the only guy on this team that I think could get to 100 RBIs. He could have a 50 home run, 100 RBI season and an average over 300. Those are MVP caliber type numbers in my opinion. Those are my thoughts on the Mariners, though. Hopefully they can finish strong in September and look forward to the 2016 season, my apologies, and can turn things around and compete in this very tough AL West division. Thank you again all for listening and watching. You can follow me on Twitter at GHAM614, and I'll be finishing Seattle week off tomorrow with my look at the Oklahoma City Thunder, formerly known as the Seattle Supersonics. Thanks again. Bye-bye.